When Laurier took control, he let it be known that Brocu's low-budget approach, or as he called it, business as usual, was over. He promised to rebuild the Expos with a winning attitude and winning players, in an effort to bring the team back to where it had been only 6 years earlier. To that end, he drafted a new partnership agreement that gave him the right to call for cash investments in exchange for team equity, an option that had been unavailable to Brocu. Most of the minority partners, though, continued to treat their participation as a public relations gesture and remained uninterested in investing additional money. When Laurier issued a cash call in May 2000, the only other partners to increase their contributions were Kuchu, Loblaw, and Stephen Brunfman. Rather than contribute more money, the minority partners proposed trading the row. Laurier instantly vetoed this suggestion. As Laurier increased his own financial contribution over the next 2 years, most of the other partners failed to do likewise, which resulted in Laurier raising his share in the franchise to 92%. Speaking in retrospect, one of the minority partners, Mark Rautenberg, said that he was both fooled and used by Laurier and called him a carpetbagger. The team payroll for 2000 increased to $33 million, nearly double the $18 million from the previous season. However, Laurier's options for rebuilding the team were somewhat limited. He discovered that he needed to improve the team immediately in order to win back the fans' trust, rather than relying on long-term improvements via the draft. Even with the team's renewed willingness to spend more on talent, most elite players were reluctant to play in Montreal, given the franchise's uncertain future and Olympic Stadium's poor playing conditions. As a result, most of the increased payroll came from the signings of free agent pitchers Graeme Lloyd and Hideki Irabu, as well as a three-way trade with the Rangers and Blue Jays that brought Rangers first baseman Lee Stevens to Montreal. These moves failed to translate into on-field success. Lloyd missed the entire season due to arthroscopic surgery. Irabu posted a 7.22 ERA, and Stevens only batted .265. The Expos lost 95 games. Interest in the team continued to decline, as both fans and businesses were unwilling to lend their support to a non-competitive team. Laurier continued to pursue the construction of the new ballpark. He sought support from Major League Baseball, the Quebec government, and architectural firm HOK Sport for a cheaper and redesigned version of Labatt Park that eschewed the retro classic concept in favor of a more modern design with curved contours and glass. HOK and MLB both thought Laurier's proposed design was structurally unsound. More seriously, although Laurier had been led to believe that MNARD had convinced the provincial government to contribute funding, in reality no agreement had been reached. To bolster the team's finances, Laurier tried to renegotiate the Expos' broadcasting deals, which were far less valuable than that of any other team. He broke off negotiations with the Sports Network, the largest English-language cable sports network in Canada, when it only offered the Expos $5,000 per game. Even allowing for the Expos' greatly reduced home territory compared to that of the Blue Jays, TSN's offer was still a pittance compared to the $200,000 it paid the Blue Jays at the time. Laurier had similar issues with prospective radio partners. The only interested parties would only air Expos games as part of a brokerage agreement in which the team paid for the airtime. The Alouettes and Canadiens had similar arrangements, which was considered highly unusual for the time. Although the team continued its French radio coverage on the Telemedia network whose flagship, CKAC, had carried the Expos since 1973, the Expos were unable to reach an agreement for English radio broadcasts. This resulted in the end of the Expos' long-time run on CIQC, which had been the Expos' English radio outlet for all but 4 years of their existence. No television coverage was available in either language. This left English-speaking fans relying on internet audio casts. Local fans accused Laurier and his stepson, David Samson, of sabotage. In truth, though, according to longtime Montreal sportscaster Mitch Melnick, there was no Anglophone radio for the 2000 season because nobody wanted to pay for it. Years later, Samson said that he had initially hoped that if the Expos got off to a hot start, local broadcasters would initiate new negotiations, but further discussions never materialized. Dave Van Horn, the team's English-language play-by-play announcer since the team's inception, left at the season's end to work for the Florida Marlins. In 2001, the Expos drew only 642,000 fans, one of the smallest totals in MLB in decades. The minority partners, whose interest was now reduced to a combined 7%, became convinced that Laurie had planned his moves to force him out. When pleas to Selig and MLB officials fell on deaf ears, the group became convinced that Selig and Laurie had conspired to force the Expos out of Montreal. At the same time, MLB took steps to vote on contraction of the leagues, with the Expos and the Minnesota Twins slated for elimination. On November 6, 2001, MLB's owners voted 28-2 in favor of contraction, with only the Expos and Twins opposed. Initial plans called for the Expos and Twins to play a lame duck season in 2002 before their franchises were revoked. Both teams were saved following a legal challenge filed in Minnesota that forced MLB to honor the Twins' lease with the Metrodome, as well as challenges by the MLBPA, as MLB was unable to find another candidate team to abolish. The immediate threat for the Expos diminished, as MLB needed to keep an even number of teams to maintain its schedule. Shortly afterward, Laurie sold the Expos to MLB and used the money he received from the sale to purchase the Florida Marlins from John Henry, who had recently purchased the Boston Red Sox. As a result of the transaction, Laurie turned a significant profit on his initial $16 million investment. MLB bought the Expos from him for $120 million and gave him a $38 million interest-free loan to complete the purchase of the Marlins. Following the sale, Laurie took virtually everything of value with him to Miami, including the Expos, computers and scouting reports. His departure also marked the final end of the proposed Labatt Park, though any realistic chance of the park being built ended when the Bouchard government repeated its previous refusal to commit any public money to the project. MLB formed Expos Baseball LP, a partnership of the other 29 clubs, to operate the team. It appointed former Anaheim Angels president Tony Tavares as team president to oversee business operations and oversee a future move of the team, and Mets assistant general manager Omar Minaya as vice president, general manager and operating head of the franchise. MLB's chief disciplinarian Frank Robinson was appointed as the team's manager. Minaya, the first Latino general manager in baseball history, inherited a difficult situation. He was hired only 72 hours before the start of spring training, and there were only 6 other employees in baseball operations. Most of the others had either followed Laurie to the Marlins or taken jobs with other clubs. As the Expos began what many assumed at the time to be their final season in 2002, the mood in the Olympic Stadium for the home opener victory over the Marlins was ugly. Montreal's home opener drew 34,000 fans, many of which came not only to say goodbye to the franchise, but also to express their disgust and anger at Laurie. Laurie's minority partners, who had gone from collectively owning 76% of the Expos to less than 7% of the Marlins, filed a Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act lawsuit against Major League Baseball, Selig and Laurie. The partners contended that Laurie and the commissioner's office had conspired to deprive them of their shares by issuing cash calls, and thus deliberately undermine the franchise's future in Montreal. The partners were ultimately unsuccessful in their suit, as it was dismissed in 2005 after an arbitration panel rejected their claims. On the field, the 2002 Expos exceeded expectations and were in playoff contention for much of the season. As they were owned by the other teams, including their direct competitors, the Expos did not have any flexibility to increase their payroll for a last-ditch postseason drive. Operating under the belief that the Expos were playing their last season in Montreal, Minaya completed a blockbuster trade with the Cleveland Indians in late June to make a final run at bringing postseason success to the city, acquiring Bartolo Colon, one of baseball's top pitchers, in exchange for several star prospects and without increasing payroll. Remembering how the Seattle Mariners had revived a stalled bid for what became Safeco Field with a playoff run in '95, Minaya believed that if the Expos made the playoffs, the renewed public and private sector support would lead to a viable owner stepping forward who would keep the team in Montreal. Minaya made several smaller moves, but the team lost its early season momentum. They went 7 games under 500 in July and August. The Expos finished with an 83-79 record, their first winning season since '96, but finished second in the NL East, 19 games out of both the division lead and the wild card. The Expos franchise was saved by a new collective bargaining agreement between the owners and players that forbade contraction until at least 2006. Speculation of contraction was replaced by rumors of relocation, as it was obvious MLB did not intend to keep the team in Montreal. While MLB was not ready to relocate the Expos right away in 2003, it sought to increase revenues by having the team play 22 of its 81 home games in San Juan, Puerto Rico. The Expos again found themselves in contention for the playoffs. On August 29, the team was tied with 4 other clubs for the National League wildcard spot. When MLB's rosters expanded on September 1, Selig announced that the Expos would not be recalling any additional players from the minor leagues. The other owners had decided against spending a few extra $1,000, a small fraction of the team's $35 million payroll, to bolster the team. Several players, including relief pitcher Eric Knott, were sent back to the minors due to budget constraints. The team faded again, finishing 18 games out of first in the East and 8 games out of the wild card spot. Later, Minaya said that the denial of the September call-ups was a message to the players, and a momentum killer. Kerry later wrote that MLB's refusal to authorize the September call-ups eroded what goodwill the Expos still had among the Montreal fanbase. After the season, Garo was lost to free agency, while staff ace Javier Vizquez was traded to the Yankees. The final season of the Montreal Expos came in 2004, and was again split between Montreal and San Juan. The team never recovered from an April win-loss record of 5-19, and finished the season with a 67-95 record. On September 29, 2004, Major League Baseball announced that the franchise would relocate to Washington, D.C. for the 2005 season. That same night, the team played its final game in Montreal, a loss before 31,000 fans. The team then played its final games as the Expos on the road, ending on October 3 against the New York Mets, the team they had faced in the franchise's inaugural game in 1969. In the Expos' last ever game, the New York Mets defeated Montreal at Shea Stadium. Jamie Carroll scored the last Expos run, and NDCH Vez became the final Expos batter in history when he grounded out in the top of the 9th to end the game. The team ended their 36-year run with an all-time record of 2,753 wins, 2,943 losses and 4 ties. The last active former Montreal Expos player in the major leagues was Bartolo Colon, who played what is likely his last game with the Texas Rangers in 2018. Colon played half a season with the Expos in 2002. The Washington Nationals occasionally wear Expos throwback uniforms. The Nationals won the 2019 World Series, the franchise's first title in its 51 seasons, under manager Dave Martinez, who had played with the Expos from '88 to '91.